Good morning, everybody. Regular attenders will know what I'm about to say. Today's proceedings are going to be live streamed, but after a 15-minute delay, those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since what they report. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes. May the witness be sworn, please. Thank you.
I do solemnly.
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly,
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Please sit down. Yes.
Please will you tell us your full name?
Bernard Patrick Greaney.
Mr. Greaney, you have provided a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 9th of February 2024. So it's at your tab A1. It's MPS 0749291. Apart from two corrections that I'll come on to, could you please confirm that the contents of your witness statement is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
Now, you have alerted the inquiry in advance that there were a couple of corrections that you wish to make to your statement. And so what we're going to do now, I'm just going to bring up those paragraphs on the screen just to address those at this point. I wonder if we could just turn up Mr. Greaney's statement, please, and begin by going to page 57, and it's paragraph 143, please. We can see that paragraph begins having considered the file note dated the 9th of July 2002 and my statement to Operation Hearn, and you just wanted to clarify that in fact technically it wasn't a statement that you provided to Operation Hearn, it was a typed copy of a statement that you provided as part of Jim Boyling's disciplinary process.
That's correct, sir.
And
yes,
you just wanted to clarify that particular point in that paragraph. And the second of the two corrections, please can we turn to page 81. It's paragraph 216. So here you say, I believe I accompanied Carlo, reference to Carlo Serracchia, on at least one trip to Italy, although in my recollection it was to Florence, not Bologna, and I acted as cover officer for him and HN118 in that time, although I was not otherwise their cover officer. And I think the point that you wanted to clarify was that you were not the only cover officer on that trip to Florence. HN24, Stephen Bills, also travelled with you, is that right?
Yes, he did.
And one of the things that you have informed the inquiry about is you remember it because you were the one that got stuck with the driving.
As ever, sir, yes.
All right. I want to just begin by your background. You joined the Metropolitan Police Service in the mid-1970s.
1975, yes.
And you were promoted to sergeant in the early 1980s?
That's correct.
You joined Special Branch in 1992.
Yes, sir.
Now, prior to your posting to the SDS, you were in fact seconded to the Animal Rights National Index, which is known as ARNI.
Yes.
In your statement, you refer to the fact that you didn't even know the SDS existed until you were in fact seconded to ARNI. Is that right?
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Now, in that particular role, you were in fact the recipient of SDS intelligence.
Yes, sir.
How did you know that that intelligence was from the SDS? How did you find out about the SDS?
The other officers in ARNI told me. They were aware of it.
In terms of that reporting, in ARNI you're receiving intelligence from various sources and you are told, well, these are reports, this is intelligence from the Special Demonstration Squad, the SDS. Could you just comment on how that intelligence stood out in any way from other sources of intelligence that you had? In other words, was this particularly useful? Was it more detailed? Was it less useful, less detailed? How would you describe the utility of the SDS
It would usually be more detailed and more current. Other than that, it didn't stand out at all.
In terms of the detail, again at that stage, this is when you first discovered or heard about the SDS, the detail that was provided in your role in Arnie, was it, well, we don't need all of this information, or was it useful? Was it too detailed? How would you describe the utility of it?
It was very useful, but there's a slight misconception as to what Arnie was in those days. It was just a receptacle for information from all over the country, which was looked at, analysed, and then sent out to areas of the country that it particularly referred to. It was only as it progressed that it moved on to receiving direct intelligence from informants.
And in terms of the utility of the SDS intelligence, how did you rate the utility of that, or did not stand out any more than any other intelligence that you were receiving?
I couldn't give an accurate answer after all these years, to be honest.
Appreciate.
It was always reliable.
Always reliable.
And often proved to be substantiated at a later time.
Okay. Your selection for the SDS, you were approached by Bob Lambert, is that right?
Yes.
Would you agree that it was a very informal approach? I think you describe in his statement that he invited you for a drink and also to meet DCI Keith Edmondson. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do, sir.
Do you know why, out of everyone, Bob Lambert approached you to join the SDS as a manager?
Well, I think with the position that he had in mind for me, I was in the perfect position to know that job, so to speak. And I'm sure he would have consulted with officers on the SDS that I previously worked with on B Squad at Special Branch to find out a little bit about me.
And so what about your experience made you suitable for that posting, in your view?
Well, the specific posting within the SDS was to cover animal rights and environmental issues. And I was sat there, I had been for 12, 18 months, I can't exactly remember, dealing with those very issues on a national level. So there would be an obvious potential reason there to get me on board as a replacement for the departing DS on the SDS. All right.
Now, I wonder if we can just bring up a document. So it's at your tab B91. It's MPS 0527313. Now, this is a branch note about a visit to the SDS by HMIC in January 1999. But what I would like to refer to, I wonder if we can turn to the second page in this document. And sorry, we could turn to page 3, please, over the page. Now, we can see here set out the management structure within the SDS for that particular visit by HMIC in January 1999. But I just wanted to use that as a reference. So in terms of the structure, the management structure in the SDS when you joined, now this is a little later, but you can see there's the DCI at the top, HN58, and below him the Detective Inspector HN53, and then below that it was your level of management, wasn't it? There were 3 SDS DSs, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you joined the SDS, the other DSs in the office, I think, were John Webb and Noel Waugh, is that right?
That's correct.
And then Steve Tiddy later took over from DS Webb, and the person we're calling HN9 took over from DS Waugh.
Yes.
And after DS Tiddy left, Steve Beals joined. Is that correct?
I think so, sir, yes.
All right, okay. Now, below that, we can see line management structure for UCOs and one clerical support officer. Now, during the period of time that you were a DS, a manager in the SDS, this was from the period May 1997 to August 2003. Just as an overview of the UCOs that were below your level of the DSs in the SDS, there were UCOs that you directly supervised.
Yes.
And there would have been other UCOs that were in the SDS at the time that, although you didn't directly supervise them, from time to time, maybe if one of your colleagues, one of your fellow DSs were away or busy with other things, you might step in and or act in that role briefly for specific operations. Okay. Just in terms, so we get a clear picture at this stage of who you supervised. You supervised directly HN26, and so this is, her cover name was Christine Green, is one of those that you supervised.
Yes.
HN14 DC Jim Boyling.
Yes.
HN16 DS James Thompson.
Yes.
HN60, whose cover name was Dave Evans.
Yes.
HN3 Jason Bishop.
Yes.
And HN77 cover name Jacqueline Anderson.
Yes.
So those are the ones that you directly supervised. But there were others that overlapped with your time, and just to go through those briefly. So for a period of about 8 months or so at the beginning of your time as a manager, Peter Francis.
Yes.
Also Mark Jenner, HN15. Carlo Soraki.
Yes.
HN81 cover name David Hagan.
Yes.
And then toward the end, HN118 Simon Wellings.
Yes.
So those, if we go back to the chart that we have in front of you, those would have been the UCOs as time progressed that were below you. Looking further up the chart, and so we've got your DCI was initially it was HN person we're referring to as HN58.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the things you say about HN58 was that he was generally laid back, but he was authoritative. Is that your description?
Yes.
Of him? How often, just from your perspective there, how often did HN58 in that position of DCI speak to the UCOs? What sort of contact did he have with the UCOs?
He had the same contact as the DI and the DSs. The bi-weekly meetings with the officers, he would be there. And also whenever the officers came into our main office, he would be there. So he wouldn't spend a lot of individual time with them, but he was always available to participate in any discussions that were needed to be brought to his attention.
And following HN58, HN36 DCI Dell.
Yes.
And you describe him as personable, intelligent, fair-minded.
Absolutely.
Again, was he similar to HN58 in terms of approachability, so that in terms of if the UCOs had something they wanted to discuss, would it have been relatively easy for them, would it have been quite natural for them to approach him?
I would say so, yes.
Okay. Now, below the rank of DCI, we have the detective inspectors. Now, mentioned earlier that it was Bob Lambert who approached you, and he was the DI when you joined.
Yes.
Now, you described him as personal, but also highly respected.
Yes.
And we've heard lots of descriptions of Bob Lambert in terms of the respect that he had from the UCOs. Could you just help us with why that was the case? So you were there, he recruited you, you spent some time, you saw him at close quarters. What was it about Bob Lambert that meant that he was highly respected?
Well, I think because he had been there and done it, basically. He had been an undercover officer, and now the new breed of undercover officers were coming in, and they were aware of his success in his operation. So it wasn't like I could talk to them because I had no experience in doing that. Bob Lambert had. He'd been there, seen it and done it, and he was respected for that.
Was there a real distinction from a manager point of view, from those managers who had been UCOs, particularly UCOs in the SDS, compared to managers that did not have that undercover experience? Was there, in terms of the way in which they were regarded by other UCOs, how would you describe that dichotomy?
Well, obviously, they can give the definitive answer to that individually, but basically, it's very difficult to tell someone what the best thing to do is in any circumstances when you yourself haven't done it. If you get my drift.
After Bob Lambert, it was DI HN53 who was in that role as your DI, is that right?
Yes.
And again, in terms of your description of him, it's positive. You describe him as being held in high esteem as well. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
Now, if we go back to the documents that we were looking at, I wonder if we can turn to page 13 in this document. So you joined as manager in 1997. So this is a couple of years later, but it sets out an overview of your role in the SDS. And one of the tasks that you had was you were responsible as well for the finances. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir, yes.
So we can see all of, in the bullet points, management of the money, maintenance of accounts. Now, that side of your responsibilities, looking back, do you think that took away your attention from the main part of your role, which was to supervise the UCOs and their intelligence? Was that a distraction? Did it sort of undermine the amount of time that you could spend with the officers?
No, it was the other way round. Dealing with the officers and the day-to-day running of the business, the operation, would take my attention away from the more mundane administrative tasks.
Now, in terms of your connection with the officers, we've heard, and can you confirm, that 2 times a week you would have a meeting with the UCOs
Yes.
that you were supervising?
Yes.
Now, in terms of these meetings, was that a forum in which the UCOs could speak openly about problems that they were having? So not just, there's going to be a demonstration on this day, or I was involved. Not just the intelligence, but difficulties that they were having. So personal issues, concerns. Was that a forum to do so, or not? Because it was in front of the other UCOs. Could you help us with that?
That was the forum to do it in the not in the open forum. Obviously, we would have a round discussion, and people would say what they'd done that week, what their plans were for the rest of the week, etc. When that has been done, that was the opportunity to have smaller individual meetings face to face, or involving the DI or the DCI, and that was the perfect time to bring up any particular problems that they were facing.
Now, can you just, we'll go to specifics, but could you just help us with the generality of that? So those problems, so when an officer was having a particular problem, could you just give us an example of where they might approach you? So you have these 2 meetings once a week, but if there's something, well, I want to discuss something with you directly, did that actually happen?
Yes, not always for a problem, but you can't discuss everything in detail in front of everybody else, because everybody else has got their own things to talk about. But it was the opportunity to bring up anything on the domestic front, child sickness or whatever, that they might need help or understanding about.
So the example you've just given is child sickness. So, for example, look, is this accurate? I'm struggling because home life is difficult, sick child, need to be there, and it's very difficult to be undercover and to deal with that. That's the sort of thing. And as a general point, from your perspective, were the officers quite open with what was happening in their personal life?
You never know, sir.
You say you never know, but For example, can you recall anyone saying, well, I'm having relationship difficulties at home, it's not going well? So like personal matters of that nature, not just logistics, I'm finding it difficult travelling in, but look, I'm having some personal problems. No. Okay. And of course, one of the things that you have set out in your statement, one of the main concerns that you had was for the officer's welfare.
Yes, sir.
And so instead of the officers coming to you and saying, look, I'm having some difficulties, did you ever inquire, maybe not in the open meetings, but just if you saw these officers week after week, you would have seen if perhaps they were a little off colour or something wasn't right? Is that would you inquire, is everything okay at home, is everything all right? Would you ever yourself be sort of proactive in sort of questioning them in terms of how they were doing?
Yes, because that's a general thing you do with people that you know and people that you work with. If you think they've been a little bit below par, and you're always asking people how they are or how their wives are, how's the kid.
Was it at a superficial level, for example, well, how's your son or daughter? Oh, fine, all good. Or was it? Can you remember sort of some more sort of personal? Well, actually, no, I'm struggling, or any explicit explanation to you that there were difficulties, particularly in a relationship?
I can't recall any.
Okay. In addition to the twice weekly meetings, is it right that the officers that you were supervising were calling you twice a day?
Yes.
Now, was the main reason for that just to make sure they're calling twice a day, because if there's a missed call, it might mean there was something wrong or something had gone wrong?
That would be the main reason, yes.
And so that wasn't a forum to discuss particular problems, or was it? What was the nature of these calls?
No, those calls were generally very brief. Hello, I'm here, I'm alive and well, I'm doing so-and-so this afternoon. Things of that ilk.
Okay. In terms of the officers that you directly supervised, were you yourself involved in recruiting any of them, the ones that you supervised?
None of them, so no.
In terms of the recruitment exercise, I think you say in your statement that it was limited, that you might have participated in some of the interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you remember those interviews?
No, sir.
I'm going to just show you a document just to see if it jogs your memory. I wonder if we can put up on the screen. So it's not in your bundle. It's MPS 0733163, please. Now, we can see this is a selection interview for 118, and we can see the panel there. It's difficult to, it's a bit blurry. HN58, HN53, and ST, so Steve Tiddy. So you were not on this particular interview panel, but I wonder if we could just sort of turn through the pages. So if we go to the next page, does this look familiar to you? Is that something that you recall, this nature of this document? So various scenarios are put to the officer, and so the DCI, the DI are asking these questions, and then you're there gauging the way in which the officer replies. Does that ring any bells?
It does. I can't recall this document specifically. I imagine the questions were varied for different interviews.
Well, let's go to something specific. If we just turn to the third page, please. You can see one of the scenarios there, and it's given this heading, sex and drugs and rock and roll, and it says, we can just make out, it says skills, moral and ethical boundaries, creativity, use of legend,
yes,
awareness, moral dilemmas, levels of commitment, different values in society.
Yes.
Now, if we just go through, if we can just zoom out, we can see how those topics are developed. So the scenario begins, you're at a social event with your wearies and have had a couple of drinks. When one of the leading lights in the organisation asks you to drive them home, what do you do? Now, do you recall that particular question?
Well, to a degree. I can see it and I can understand it. Yes.
And so, for example, is this right, that the test is don't drink and drive, and so what you're looking for is creativity of how to get out of that situation where an activist that you're spying on suggests that you drive even though you've drunk too much alcohol, and you're seeing how they present with scenarios that are likely to happen in their deployment.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next one. As you are over the limit, the same weary offers to share a cab home with you. When you get to your place, they do a bunk from the cab. What do you do? So again, you're sort of testing the officer, or the applicant, how would they react to a scenario that's likely to happen at some stage, or quite possible to happen during a deployment if they were successful.
Yes.
All right. And then when the cab has finally gone, the weary invites herself in for coffee and then offers you a joint so that you can both relax. What do you do? Again, a scenario that's likely to occur if they go into a certain field, and you want to see, well, how would they react to that? Would they agree to, for example, smoke cannabis? And so you're looking at how they react to a scenario that's likely to happen, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Can we turn over the page, please? So as this scenario develops, we can see the last question, or the last part of the scenario is this. When you have both had coffee, it becomes obvious that she has no intention of leaving before the morning. What do you do? Now, long time ago, you were involved in some of these interviews, but not significant involvement in the recruitment process. But do you remember this? Does that particular...
Not specifically, sir, no.
One of the things that you said in your statement is that the only correct answer to each of those points that we just had a look at was to avoid criminality or inappropriate behaviour. And what you said in your statement was that I believe that the responses to this particular question, so the one we're looking at the top, was a deal breaker.
Yes.
So this is setting out a scenario that could very well happen.
Yes.
And the purpose of it is to see, so if the person being interviewed said, oh, well, I would sleep with the activist and I would remain cover. That would be, right, that's it, we're not going to hire this particular applicant, not suitable for the SDS. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
But when you describe it as it's a deal breaker, this particular question, well, who told you that? What? Because you're very clear that, well, you know, if an applicant is saying, well, yeah, I would have remained. I need to keep my cover, so I would have had sex with the activist and kept my cover, and you're very clear that that's a deal breaker. No, you're not going to be joining the SDS. But how did you know that was a deal breaker? That was the wrong answer?
It was a deal breaker to me, and I'm 100% sure it was a deal breaker to the DI and the DCI as well, because you can't do that.
Was that ever communicated to the UCOs, that they weren't allowed to sleep with activists?
I'm sure it was.
I'm going to. I wonder if we can take this document down. I just want to go back to your statement. I wonder if we could turn to page 20, please, in Mr. Greaney's statement. It's paragraph 54. It's 54G, so right at the top. So you say, I did not train UCOs. Their development was looked after by the other UCOs, particularly those who were more senior or operating in related groups. During my time in the SDS, both DIs and had previously been UCOs, as HN58 had been. So far as I provided any guidance, my recollection is that this was part of my pastoral supervisory role. Now, just stepping back from that, would you agree that was inadequate, that the UCO's training, that their development wasn't looked after by the managers, but by other UCOs? Looking at that, back at it now, do you think that's a bit strange?
I think I alluded to it earlier, sir. How do you train somebody to do something that you haven't done, especially something of this nature?
Well, if we you address that, in fact, in the next paragraph. So I wonder if we could just go to, it's H. And it's the last sentence. So you say, I lacked the direct experience to tell them how to manage their day-to-day work, but I would act as a sounding board if required. So again, going back to your recruitment, and so you described, well, experience in ARNI, in terms of animal rights issues. You're a very good analyst and had spent many years recipient of that intelligence. But in terms of supervising undercover officers, firstly, you had never been a UCO.
No.
You'd never worked with UCOs before joining the SDS.
No.
And what if someone were to say that you were unsuitable to be a manager because you, to use your own words, lacked direct experience to tell them how to manage their day-to-day work?
Well, it's a valid point, but you have to have people in that position. You can't get former undercover officers permanently to supervise new undercover officers. I don't see how that's sustainable numerically.
I wonder if we can just take this page down. I just want to ask you something on the same topic, but it's later in your statement. Could we turn to page 42? It's paragraph 107 in your statement. So here you say, as cover officer, at least part of my role was to ensure that the UCOs kept within the rules as police officers and the scope of their authorisation. I did not feel constrained to supervising my UCOs in cases where another cover officer was absent, whether on duty or leave. Apart from the notes about expenses and cover driving licences, I do not recall the content of these documents being discussed generally. Where they were relevant, my understanding is that new UCOs would be directed to read policy documents as part of their preparation. And so, again, the language that you are using is that, well, your understanding is that new UCOs would be directed to read policy documents. Mm-hmm. But who's directing them? If you're their direct manager, and were you directing them?
I would have been, yes.
And so, policy documents, would this include the Tradecraft Manual?
Tradecraft Manual was there to be read, yes.
Did you read the Tradecraft Manual?
I'm sure I did so, yes.
In your statement, you say about the Tradecraft Manual that it certainly was not deemed authoritative on any point of tradecraft. Can you just help us with why you've said that it wasn't deemed authoritative on any point of tradecraft? And the way you describe it is a collection of anecdotes from individual officers.
I think it's exactly that, sir. Individual stories from previous undercover officers, not a specific, this is how you do things, just examples of things that have happened.
Well, just to be fair to you, if we just go to that particular part of your statement, which is on this page, sorry, it's over the page, or paragraph 109, please. Okay. Now, you refer to it as, in the middle, it had no particular status within the SDS. It certainly was not deemed authoritative on any point of tradecraft. Prospective UCOs were encouraged to discuss their preparation with the deployed UCOs in preference to reading documents.
Yes.
I wonder if we could just, in terms of that description of it being no particular status, I wonder if we can actually turn to the Tradecraft Manual itself. Could we please, so your tab B10, refer to MPS 0527597, please? Special Demonstration Squad, Tradecraft Manual. Would you agree that the front page gives the impression that it has status?
Yes, looking at it, yes.
You've said that it wasn't authoritative, but would you accept, looking at the document, that there was a danger that a new recruit, looking at that, would think it was authoritative?
Well, they could take that view, so yes.
I wonder if we could turn to page 5, please. And I wonder if we can just highlight just the top few lines, please, beginning this manual. So the very first paragraph, paragraph 1.1, this manual of tradecraft for the Special Demonstration Squad is designed both for new members of the squad and also as a guide to best practice for members of the squad during their posting. So, again, if this document you have described as not deemed authoritative on any point of tradecraft, collection of anecdotes, no particular status. But that's not what it says, is it? This is, rather than saying this manual is a collection of anecdotes, it says this manual is of tradecraft is designed as a guide to best practice. So it's the opposite of what you've just described, isn't it?
As a guide, I have said it's a collection of anecdotes, and I've not read it for 30 years. That is my recollection of what it was. It wasn't a document that you went to and said, well, this has happened, I'm going to do A, B and C because that's what they do there. It's just an example of what has happened in the past. It's not binding in what it contains.
It's clear, isn't it, that right from the opening of this document, that anyone reading it, if someone were to ask a new recruit, right, just read the first paragraph of this document, is it a collection of anecdotes that have no real authority, or is it your guide to best practice? They're going to say, well, it's a guide to best practice, that's what it says, and it goes into a lot of detail.
They may say that, so yes.
Could we please turn to page 27? So, paragraph 5.6.1, if we can begin with that. So, sexual liaisons. 5.6.1, the thorny issue of romantic entanglements during a tour is the cause of much soul-searching and concern. And then this. In the past, emotional ties to the opposition have happened and caused all sorts of difficulties, including divorce, deception, and disciplinary charges. While it is not my place to moralise, one should try to avoid the opposite sex for as long as possible. Now, again, you've said, and it's correct, this is all a long time ago, but do you remember reading this section of the Tradecraft Manual?
As I said, sir, I read this 30 years ago. I have no specific recollection of each individual entry.
Were you aware of any difficulties, divorces, disciplinary charges arising out of that heading, sexual liaisons?
I'm sure they're in the book there somewhere, but I can't instantly recount them, sir, no.
Was this not the actual guidance that was applied at the time? So we can see that last sentence there. One should try to avoid the opposite sex for as long as possible. So it's not saying we're going back to that interview scenario as a deal breaker. When we get to the Tradecraft Manual, what it says is try and avoid it for as long as possible.
Yes.
But what it doesn't say is it's a deal breaker. Do not do that, because if you do, you're out of the SDS. It's permissive, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't really understand what you mean by that.
So in the interview scenario, someone who's said, "Oh, I would have slept with the activist to retain my cover," you said that was a deal breaker, that was wrong, and that was your understanding. But if we look at the manual that the officers are pointed to at the beginning of their deployment, it's not put in that way, is it? It's saying, well, look, try and avoid it for as long as possible. So it's different.
Try and avoid the opposite sex for as long as possible. Try to avoid getting into that situation as long as possible.
But it's clear, I mean, the heading in bold, sexual liaisons, it's clear what it's referring to, isn't it?
Ultimately, yes.
Yeah. Now, if we look at the next paragraph, please, which 5.6.2 refers to the free love attitudes of the 60s and 70s have largely disappeared in the minds of extremists following herpes, hepatitis and AIDS. However, if you are doing your job properly, men and women in the field will experience occasional approaches from males and females, straight and gay. Would you agree that this suggests that if you as a UCO are not approached by members of the opposite sex, if then you're doing something wrong as a UCO?
No.
If you're not being approached...
Well, that's how the author of this has presented it, and I disagree.
Okay. Could we turn to the next paragraph, please? So 5.6.3, so under the same heading. I wonder if we can show the next page as well, maybe just side by side, because the paragraph... Thank you. Thank you very much. While you may try to avoid any sexual encounter, there may come a time when your lack of interest may become suspicious. In these circumstances, you can either try to introduce an appropriate male or female from your own relations or friends to meet the wearies on a few occasions, or ask the office if they can find an ex-SDS operative to fill such a role. Again, do you remember reading that?
I don't remember reading it, but it's not something that would be done, not with one of my officers.
Would you agree that that advice is completely reckless, suggesting that an undercover officer turns to a relation or a friend of those to meet activists that they are spying on? Completely reckless advice, yes?
Madness.
Madness. But if you had read this at the time, would you not have said to one of your DS colleagues, or you described how approachable the DCI, the DI, everyone was approachable, everyone could talk about what they wanted to talk about. Do you have any recollection of reading particularly these sections of the Tradecraft Manual and say, what is this? This is madness. Why is this the guide to, not the guide to worst practice, this is the guide to best practice? What is this document?
I don't remember raising it with anybody, so no.
All right.
But I imagine if an officer read that and came to me and said, I've got a plan to get my auntie in to help me out with this, he would soon be disillusioned as to the possibility of that happening.
But again, in your role, as you've described in terms of your experience, not having that experience in undercover operations, and instead referring the UCOs who are coming in to join the SDS to these policy documents. And so in terms of your training, was this not in effect a substitute for your training? So you said, well, I wasn't training the undercover officers, they knew what they were doing, they should ask their colleagues. But what you were doing is you were pointing them to documents such as this that were giving advice that you've described as madness. Looking back on that now, how did that arise, do you think?
People weren't brought in and said, go and read the Tradecraft Manual, you'll find everything you need to know in there to run your operation. People were made aware of the existence of the Tradecraft Manual. Go and have a look at it if you like. It goes back, I don't know, to the dawn of the SDS. I can imagine there's all sorts of bits and pieces in there that are undesirable.
Well, looking back on it now, is that not one of the main problems? That, as you said, you've got guidance going back to the dawn of the SDS that you've described as an experienced officer as madness.
One part of it I have, yes.
But in terms of the one part, it is a part that we have heard countless accounts of how it has shattered particularly women's lives as a result of undercover officers sleeping with them. So although it is one part, it has contributed would you agree, to shattering a number of people's lives?
Well, we've kind of moved on a paragraph here, so I'm looking at the first one, 563. That's what I'm referring to. The second paragraph we haven't actually gone through.
Let's turn to that. Both options are fraught with difficulty, and you must make your own mind up about how to proceed. Pausing there. Why is it left to the UCO to make up their mind about engaging in sexual relationships with activists in their cover role? Wouldn't the best advice be, if that situation should ever arise, or if it is developing, to contact your manager straight away for assistance?
Absolutely.
But it's the opposite of the correct advice, isn't it?
Yes,
you must make your own mind up.
As I say, sir, this is not a document that was given to officers saying, read that, that is what you do. This was a collection of documents in a book, a binder, whatever, which officers were entitled to go and have a read and see what happened during the history of the organisation. It's not rules by which they are bound to operate, or guidelines. It's just, I think, as I said initially, just a set of stories.
If you have no other option but to become involved with a weary, you should try to have fleeting, disastrous relationships with individuals who are not important to your sources of information. One cannot be involved with a weary in a relationship for any period of time without risking serious consequences. So the advice there is, we've heard repeated a number of times, try to have fleeting, disastrous relationships. It's not a story, though, is it? It's advice to undercover officers as best practice, because that's what it says at the beginning of the Tradecraft Manual.
From this author, whoever that may be.
But why was it still in existence? Why was it all new recruits read the Tradecraft Manual before they're deployed? All of them referred to this document. All of them asked to read it. And it's the opposite, isn't it, of the advice that they should have been given.
When you go into it specifically and deeply, say yes.
Now, of course, we know that the majority of the undercover officers were male, and the majority of the activists that undercover officers slept with in their undercover role were female. So would you agree that it was women, not men, who were harmed as a result of the officers following this advice and sleeping with activists? There was predominantly women who were the victims of that conduct.
Yes.
Would you agree that is the effect of that is misogynistic, that it is sexist, because essentially it is harming women to further undercover operations?
Yes. But, well, not the sexist and misogynist part of it. I don't think that was an aspect of our office at all. It's just people getting together in life and forming relationships. Those relationships should have been cut off at the very start. If someone is trying to make advances to you or clearly wants to become more closer than just friends, then that should be put a stop to.
So
that's what these guys knew. You don't do it.
You never told them that?
Can I think of a specific example where I've sat somebody down and said, you must not have sexual relationships with men or women out there? I can't recall that. But definitely that is the line that was taken.
Just in terms of the way that you've described it, I just want to just refer you to what was said by the Commissioner. So this is the Metropolitan Police Service. This is the opening to our tranche of the inquiry. And so there was reference made as follows: a significant number of UCOs engaged in serious sexual misconduct, and there was a continuing failure by the SDS's managers to prevent that misconduct from occurring. The MPS again apologises to the individuals affected and to the public for these failings and for the wider culture of misogyny and sexism that allowed them to happen. Now, that description was put forward on behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service.
Yes.
Would you agree with that, or is it exaggerated or unfair? How would you characterise that?
I think it's unfair to wrap everybody up in that. If anybody wants to accuse me of being a misogynist or a sexist, I would take great exception to it. But being a member of the SDS management, I'm swept up in that overriding explanation or statement.
I want to ask you about individual officers and your knowledge of the sexual relationships that they engaged in. I'd like to begin with HN26. So, cover name Christine Green. This was an officer that you described as being an excellent UCO. Is that right? Okay. And just to confirm, your evidence as reflected in your statement is that you did not know that she had engaged in a sexual relationship with an activist by the name of Thomas Frampton.
Yes.
So he also had a nickname, Joe Tax, and also Joe Tex. I just want to just take you through some documents in relation to her interaction with Frampton, and just to go back to that particular time. It is going back quite a way. I wonder if we could turn to MPS 0247385. So I'm afraid it's not in your bundle, but I think we can bring it up on screen. So what this is, it's a report from HN26 dated the 3rd of December 1997. And you can see Road Bridge, so that was HN26's code name. So Thomas Frampton there. And in particular, so this particular report from one of your UCOs, you would have seen this report, you would have maybe typed it up, is that right?
Quite probably so, yes.
Again, a number of years ago, but we can see veteran hunt saboteur Frampton has finally ended his tempestuous relationship with privacy and is now seeking to fill his empty hours by becoming involved in mainstream ALF activity. And so, Animal Liberation Front, from your experience in Arnie, anyone involved in mainstream ALF activity was someone that you're particularly interested in.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we just follow through this particular timeline, so this is December 97. If we go to another document, please, it's 0247472. Now, this document that we're going to put on screen is a file note 30th of January 1998. And so the summary of this is HN26 is not really producing any particularly helpful reporting. It's time to bring her operation to an end. And we can see, in fact, the first bullet point, infiltration of the ALF at a national level, it's no longer a realistic option. And we can see the beginning of the last paragraph, RB, so Road Bridge HN26. She's disappointed that she would not be continuing her efforts to infiltrate the upper echelons of the ALF. She acknowledged that it had become increasingly difficult to achieve that objective. She said she would need a longer period in the field to do so, and it says, I said that she now had an opportunity to reflect on our view before discussing with HN58 next, who would then make a final decision. Now, we can see that this note was submitted to HN58, you, Noel War, Steve Tiddies. So at the time, you would have been copied into this
Yes.
file note. Could you just help us with this? So this meeting with HN26, so well, you're not in a position to infiltrate the ALF, let alone the upper echelons. But then it's left with this. We're going to give you an opportunity to reflect on our view. And one interpretation of that is, would you agree? Well, it's coming to an end. You haven't infiltrated the ALF, but see what you can do. We're not closing it down. You've got an opportunity to reflect. How would you interpret that, or how did you interpret it?
I would interpret that as Bob saying, this is the situation. We're looking to pull you out early next year. What do you think about it? And then the matter is going to be brought up with HN58 at a later date.
I wonder if we can take that document down. So again, that was 30th of January. And again, sorry, so this document is not in your bundle, but we're going to bring it up on screen. It's MPS 0247517. So we're now moving forward to just under 4 weeks later.
Yep.
So February 1998, strategy meeting between the SDS and C Squad. And we can see various officers referred to, but let's just focus on HN26 Road Bridge. And it says this: an accepted member of London Animal Action who has been involved in a number of campaigns outside London, Sabbing Hillgrove, and then this, has recently become involved in a small group which has the potential to commit serious criminal damage. Okay?
Yep.
So, can you help us with this? You've got a report in December saying Frampton's had a break-up with his relationship's over. You've got the following month, January, HN26, you're not able to infiltrate the ALF. Well, you'll have some time to reflect. And then about 4 weeks later, there's now reference to her having recently become involved in a group with the potential to commit serious criminal damage. We can see there's a change.
Yes.
And can you help us with your recollection of that change?
I'm afraid I can't. I don't know what's happened in the intervening period.
Did you ask? This is your UCO. She's her deployment's not going anywhere. She's not able to infiltrate the ALF. She's told to reflect, and then things turn around. Did you not ask? Wow, what's changed?
I'm sure I did.
Let's move to the following month. So this is just about 3 weeks later. I wonder if we can turn up MPS 0247547, please. Now, this is a file note that Bob Lambert drafted, but he copied this in to you. And again, it's about, you can see it's a file note about Road Bridge. So again, it's not long after that meeting where she's asked to reflect. And if we could turn to the first paragraph on page 1. Road Bridge has identified a London-based ALF cell with potential to commit serious crime. The leader of the cell is Joe Tex, an established and respected ALF activist. And so, again, the position in a few weeks has changed from infiltration of the ALF at national level was no longer a realistic option, reflect, to suddenly a complete turnaround. And here we have HN26 identifying a London-based ALF cell with the potential to commit serious crime. So a significant turnaround in this deployment.
Yes.
And again, in your role as her supervisor, do you have any recollection of the turnaround? So, well, yes, looking back on it, well, yeah, this officer was on the way out, wasn't producing any proper intelligence, to suddenly really getting somewhere. Does that ring any bells
I can't recall what was said and done 28 years ago or whatever it was. So clearly, intelligence is now being supplied about Joe Tex, Frampton, a very worthwhile figure within the animal rights groups that we would look at. And if Bob Lambert has said that he's worth looking at, then we will.
And again, your experience, and one of the reasons that you said, as far as you're aware, joining the SDS is your experience with, for example, animal rights activists. And you knew, didn't you, that anyone involved in ALF activism in an ALF cell, this is something very difficult to infiltrate. It's not the ALF don't have a stand on the high street looking for members. It's very difficult to infiltrate. So this was an exceptional achievement, yes?
Not exceptional if you know the person. I mean, the ALF was not an organisation as such. It had no structure to it. People just attributed themselves to the Animal Liberation Front in whatever action they were doing, wherever they were doing it in the country.
If we look at, I wonder if we can just zoom out of that and just go to the last paragraph. So the last paragraph says, in recent weeks, Tex has taken RB into his confidence, and this has opened up a rich seam of intelligence. It has also, of course, placed an increased burden on RB, and she is now committed to her cover role to an unprecedented extent. So again, in terms of the language used here, this is Bob Lambert, who you respected, and with your own experience of animal rights activism at this level, unprecedented extent of her commitment. Were you not aware that she was sleeping with Thomas Frampton, and that's how she obtained this intelligence?
No, sir. I was totally unaware.
If we turn over the page, please, to paragraph 4 on the next page, there is a reference in paragraph 4. We can see the last sentence, that it comes so soon after the writer's more downbeat assessment of her ability to provide high-grade ALF intelligence is a lesson to him, and then this, and a tribute to RB's willingness to explore all options available to her. What were those options? What options did she explore?
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that bit, sir.
So the last, I wonder if we can just, it's the last few words, tribute to RB's willingness to explore all options available to her. So it's the last few words.
I'm still not seeing that. I'm only seeing one paragraph.
So do you have the paragraph that begins, RB has made significant breakthrough?
Yes.
So if you go to, can you see this 3 lines down towards the end, that it comes so soon?
Yes, yes.
So that it comes so soon after the writer's more downbeat assessment of her ability to provide high-grade ALF intelligence is a lesson to him, and then this bit, and a tribute to RB's willingness to explore all options available to her.
Yes.
Well, this is a report, a file note. Bob Lambert has taken the time to write. We can see the detail of it. It's the most significant development in HN26, your UCO's deployment. And the references here to she's committed to an unprecedented extent, her willingness to explore all options available to her. And my question is, well, what are those options available to her if they're not sleeping with Thomas Frampton to get the intelligence?
It would strike me that the view was Robridge was coasting along, just going along day to day. But when she was faced with her operation coming to an end, she started to work a little bit harder, moved into a higher gear and started to get better results. There's nothing there about her sleeping with him.
Could we turn to the next paragraph, please? So if we look at the 4th line down, you say there's nothing there about her sleeping with him. It says this: she is now, this is Bob Lambert, in a file note to you, or including you in the copy list, she is now regularly enhancing her cover credibility by staying overnight with activists when they travel to different parts of the country on demonstrations and other business.
Yes.
In April, she plans to travel with Tex and others to a week-long animal rights gathering in Holland, and this will further enhance her standing.
Yes.
So again, following the chronology, you have, here's a report, Thomas Frampton's has a relationship breakdown. Then there's a meeting, your intelligence is not going anywhere, reflect, and then suddenly you have, she has infiltrated an ALF cell, she's close to Thomas Frampton to an unprecedented extent, and is now regularly enhancing her cover by staying overnight. And again, the same point.
By staying overnight with activists. Not staying overnight with Thomas Frampton.
Now, it's a phrase that has been referred to a number of times. I just want to see what your reaction to it would be. If someone were to say, well, just looking at all of these descriptions, is what was going on, if you were not asking her directly, were you sleeping with Thomas Frampton? How did you suddenly infiltrate this group to such an extent? If someone were to say, well, the reason what was happening is just turning a blind eye to what she was doing, you must have known that she was sleeping with Mr. Frampton, that this was standard SDS practice, and what you're doing is turning a blind eye to it.
Absolutely not.
We know now that she was in a relationship with Thomas Frampton.
Yes.
Okay. If you were not turning a blind eye to it, would you agree with this, that it was a blind spot for you? These officers were having sex with activists, but you were just unaware of it. It was a blind spot.
What I would like to say, sir, is that we now know that was happening. And from that position, we are now turning round and looking back over the history of it, and everything in there you can now happily put into that scenario because you knew it happened. When I was there, I'm looking to the future. I don't know what's happened in the past. I'm looking to the future, and there was nothing in that indicated to me that Roadbridge was engaged in a relationship of that sort, nor with any of the other officers.
Staying overnight?
With activists, yes. All SDS officers do that all the time. If they're going to do a demonstration halfway up the country, they're staying with other activists halfway up the country. It's common.
Before moving on from HN26, I just want to ask you briefly about a topic that relates to, and you'll remember this, the release of mink from Crow Hill Farm.
Yes.
Okay. So this was, again, in the chronology, we were looking at 1998. So this is towards the summer of 1998, August of that time. And I want to turn, please, and so it's at your tab B81. This is, in fact, one of your file notes. And I just want to ask you briefly about this. So it's MPS 0247766, please. So I wonder if we can turn to page 2, and it's the last paragraph. At this stage of RB's HN26's operation, there is nothing to be gained in the long term by providing preemptive intelligence to disrupt this action. There are potentially far more serious offences in the offing, and this case, as with the next planned offensive, would be better utilised to cement RB's status rather than to create an atmosphere of uncertainty. And so you recall this particular incident where 6,000 mink were released from Crow Hill Mink Farm, and HN26 was involved in that particular action, again with Mr. Frampton.
Yes.
And aware of the significant damage that it did the surrounding environment. Extremely serious criminal offence to do that. And I just want to ask you about what your briefing was to HN26, because you were aware of what was going to happen in advance.
Yes.
And was your thinking that this was a great opportunity for HN26 to burn her credentials as an ALF activist? That was because the real aim was to catch Joe Frampton committing a very serious offence. That was the target.
That was the bottom line, that the intelligence was indicating that he was going to undertake firebombing. And that was what we were looking to stop and arrest him for. This was a smaller action, nothing like a firebombing, that would enable Roadbridge, as I've said, to further cement her status within that group, to be privy to the firebombings, which was, I deemed, to be far more important. On reflection, and nothing to do with the fact that they were having a relationship or anything, but on reflection, I should have said, no, that's not a good idea on several levels, and I'm sorry that I didn't.
Was that the problem, though? You wanted to get Thomas Frampton, and so willing to have serious criminal activity take place with that bigger end in mind, because you were focused on, let's get him arrested for committing a major arson.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you, if we can take that document down, I just want to ask you about this particular document. It's in, so again, it's not in your bundle, but we'll bring it up on screen. It's MPS 0247864, please. And so I wonder if we can turn forward to, in the codes of practice, could we turn to Undercover Operations Code of Practice? This is dated 3rd of June 1998. Could we turn to paragraph 2.4, which is on page 4? I'd just like to ask you for your opinion on this, because here it says, where there is serious criminal activity being planned, and the field officer is party to that activity, then in accordance with the criteria laid down in paragraph 1.6, authorisation will be sought from Commander of Special Branch. Is it fair to say that in this instance that authorisation was not sought?
So I understand.
Is this an example of the SDS acting outside the rules?
No. I mean, my first point is I didn't realise it was as far as the commander. I thought perhaps Chief Superintendent. And I thought it was authorised.
I'd like to ask you now, please, about another officer that you supervised, HN16 DS James Thompson. In relation to Mr. Thompson, would you agree with this description that you had a very good rapport with him?
I thought so, yes.
I wonder if you can turn up MPS 0738055. So this is a document in your tab B220. So this is a letter recounting an Operation Hearn interview with you in relation to HN16. We'll just wait for that to be brought up on screen. If we look at, if we can turn to the second page of that, please, in particular paragraph 3. So I wonder if we could just zoom out, just so we have just the document without the, thank you. So can you see the paragraph beginning? It's the third one. Greaney explained that he was the cover officer to Thompson. Maybe if we just expand that one, thank you. So Greaney explained that he was the cover officer for Thompson from the point of joining the Special Demonstration Squad in the summer of '97. Thompson would have been in the field for approximately a year. And then this. He, referring to you, described Thompson as, quote, a maverick within a maverick unit, a unit that didn't follow the normal rules, unquote, acknowledging that the SDS was an extraordinarily unique unit in policing terms. Now, this is a letter that is summarising, recounting an Operation Hearn interview with you. I just want to ask you about the accuracy of that. When it says that you describe Thompson as a maverick within a maverick unit, is that accurate?
I will give them the benefit of the doubt and say yes, because I never saw these officers from Operation Hearn post the interview they had with me at my house. What I mean is they took contemporaneous notes, 2 officers, one of them writing in longhand as we discuss matters. And when I saw them off, they said, yes, we'll go and get this typed up and we'll come back and get you to sign your statement. And I never saw them again. So from that perspective, I don't give 100% guarantee that what here is right, but I'm not disputing what those few lines there in front of me.
And so in terms of your description there, why did you describe the SDS as a maverick unit?
Because it's a completely unique unit. It has undercover officers that live lives out there for 4, 5, 6 years doing a job that nobody else is doing. That, I think, is not following the normal rules in every shape.
Would you accept that an undercover policing unit should follow the rules?
I'm not talking about the rules of the undercover unit, I'm talking about the general rules, which they can't possibly adhere to.
In terms of, and again, the main focus, the question that I'm asking you this morning is about sexual relationships with activists. Why couldn't they follow the normal rules and not engage in that conduct?
Well, of course they could.
I wonder if we could just turn to the third page. It's the page on the right-hand side here, and it's just the middle paragraph beginning in terms of his relationship with Thompson. So this is your relationship with Mr. Thompson. So in terms of his relationship with Thompson and whether he confided in him, Mr. Greaney pointed out that, and then this, there could often be a case of the operatives knew best how to run their operation. So again, would you agree it's the same? This was your approach, that in your own mind at the time, your view was that they knew best?
No. That is Operation Hearn's interpretation of whatever it was I said at the time.
Okay.
They certainly knew best how to run their operation on the day-to-day events.
They are at the coalface, and as is common amongst police in general, this mentality is sometimes prevalent. The nature of the SDS role meant supervision was minimal, and the field officers were very independent to the point where out in the field they would make active decisions on operations. Now again, you have made clear this is not a situation where you're interviewed, you're provided with the interview transcript, you can write any corrections or confirm its accuracy. Operation Hearn interview, and then they go away, and then sometimes later you see this document. But in terms of that description that they record from meeting with you, that the nature of the SDS role meant that supervision was minimal, would you agree that is what you told Operation Hearn, that the supervision of these UCOs was minimal.
Minimal in the field.
Where else would it be other than the field?
In the office, in the general planning of their operation, where they're going, what they're doing, who they're meeting, where it's going to take them. But from the day-to-day instant reaction to what is occurring in front of them and around them, it's all down to them. There's no supervision over that.
And looking back on it now, would you accept that that was wrong? The having minimal supervision of these officers in the field, that allowed all the misconduct that we've heard about in this inquiry. It's a hands-off approach. You could be used.
Well, no, it's not a hands-off approach. Not being supervising them in the field. How do you do it? You can't. Put another officer in there to supervise them. Who's supervising him? At some stage, you have to trust the people that are doing this job, and I did.
He's a highly experienced detective managers in the SDS. The bread and butter day-to-day work is spying on people.
Yes.
Keeping tabs on your own UCOs. That is not an impossible task, is it?
Yes, it is.
We have seen examples, and we'll come to it. For example, whenever there's an issue with, say, there may be a compromise to an officer's deployment, security services involved, phone records downloaded, there is a huge amount of work that goes on to increasing the level of supervision and spying on various activists. And so the suggestion that you can't monitor the undercover officers, that's not right, is it?
Yes, it is right.
If we look in this, I'm going to ask if we can just turn to another document. It is MPS. We're going to look at this document. We're going to take a short break. It's MPS 0719-722. Now, you were aware of HN53's detailed investigation into James Thompson, all the matters that he was suspected on, and you were aware that a significant amount of work was being done checking all of his misconduct, yes?
Yes.
And in terms of the document that we have here, this is an example of HN53's work in examining what had happened with Mr. Thompson. I'm going to ask if we could turn to page 11 in this document, please. Because in this document, HN53 refers to relationships, and he says this: DS Thompson has privately expressed concerns to HN1 that the officer's inquiries related to the fact that he had established relationships whilst in the field. In terms of the background to the inquiries, those concerns were groundless, but the frequency of contacts with non-activist female subscribers could show that this was the case. Now, were you aware that HN53, amongst other things in his investigation of Thompson, got hold of his phone records, went through who he was phoning, and then it became apparent that he was making a lot of telephone calls to female activists? Does that?
No, sir.
You are the officer directly supervising Mr. Thompson, but here you can see that HN53 is setting out the results of his inquiries, where you have other officers referring to the fact that he was concerned that this was all about relationships, and that in fact the frequency of contact with females in the subscriber records showed that this was the case. But would you accept that it is quite possible to, for example, something basic as just looking at officers' phone records to see what they've been up to, who they're contacting? It's very, very straightforward, and in fact a good simple way of keeping tabs on them, of supervising them.
It could be done, yes.
Can I just ask about accommodation? To what extent with the UCOs were you aware of where they were living, who were they living with? Is this something that you let them get on with that, or is that something that you took a close interest in?
You take a part in where they're going to set up their flat and the surrounding area and access to various bits and pieces. But then they secure the flat and they move in, and they should move in on their own.
In relation to James Thompson, your evidence is that in relation to his relationships with Sarah and then Ellie, that this is something you just simply had no knowledge of at the time?
None whatsoever.
Okay. Did you stay in contact with HN16 James Thompson after he left the SDS?
Not as such, no. Our paths would occasionally cross, but there was no real communication, no.
Right. So I don't know whether that's a convenient moment to break.
So we'll break for a quarter of an hour, then resume.
wonder if we can just turn up a document MPS 40919, please. Now, you remember before the break at the beginning, towards the beginning of my questions to you, asking you about the scenario test in the selection interviews. We have another set of documents relating to interviews, and you can see that these are in towards the end of 1997, and so we can see Matt Simmons. If we turn through this document, we can see other potential candidates, HN3, who was ultimately successful, one of the officers that you supervised but did not interview. But I just want to check with you your view of something that's written on page 10. It's in relation to your evidence that in relation to the sex and drugs and rock and roll scenario, that it was, in your view, a deal breaker if the undercover officer gave an indication that the hypothetical activists who wanted to sleep over, whether they would sleep with them or not. Because here we have in the second session, DCI introduction to the session, stated that in fact there were no right or wrong answers to the various scenarios set. We are looking at a number of skills: self-discipline, self-motivation, energy, persistence, creativity, innovation, reasoning, planning, quick thinking, handle moral, ethical questions, response to loss of status, constraints on social domestic life. But here you have the DCI saying, well, look, you can have a series of scenarios and no right or wrong answer to any of these. We just want to see how you react and your reasoning for that. And would you agree that that, in fact, reflects more what we saw in the Tradecraft Manual? In a sense, try and avoid, as long as possible, having sexual relationships, but if you're going to have a sexual relationship, make sure it's as brief as possible. And here you have the DCI referring to these questions as none of these are deal breakers. We just want to see how you articulate your response.
I think it's misleading saying there's no right or wrong answers. To take that literally, there are very, very, very many wrong answers. You're talking about bilking the cabbie and running off. If you said yes, I'd punch the cabbie in the face and leg it with my newfound friend, that would be a seriously wrong answer.
Okay. Well, I wonder if you can take that document down. I want to turn to another officer. So Jim Boyling. Again, was this a UCO that you would agree you had a particularly good rapport with, Jim Boyling?
I thought so.
Yeah. In relation to your evidence in your statement, your evidence is that you had no knowledge of his relationship with Monica, Ruth, Rosa, the pseudonyms that we're applying to those.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you about something that Jim Boyling said when he gave his evidence. Now, can I ask first, did you watch Jim Boyling's evidence or?
No, sir.
No, okay. One of the things that he said is that he remembered once that he was going through some surveillance photographs with you and trying to identify the people in the surveillance photographs. And he said that there was once, for example, there was a photograph showing him and he thought it was Monica, so this is 1997, so after you began as a manager. And the way he described it, he said, well, we were obviously a couple in the photograph, but then nobody was asking any questions. So, for example, the questions about, well, who's this, who's this, who's this, who's this? But the person that he's obviously, the woman that he's obviously in a relationship with, that they're acting as a couple, no questions asked about the identity of that person.
Do we have that photograph, sir?
We do not have that photograph, but I can. I'll say to you exactly what Jim Boyling said. He said, occasionally, for instance, you would get surveillance photographs or photographs from a demo that had been sent out for known organisers to be identified. And I remember once one of the photographs showed me with, I think it was Monica. We were obviously a couple in the photograph, but there was nobody asked about that. And the question, well, being careful about ciphers, which managers saw those photographs? And he said that he thought it was you who had thought about it, that it was you who had seen the photograph and not asked. Does that ring any bells?
None whatsoever, sir. No. When was this, 1997?
1997.
I mean, that's pretty much when I started on the group. I can't remember seeing that.
So he was asked, in terms of acknowledgements that it was happening, i.e. relationship, what signs were that managers knew it was happening, even if they were not inviting discussion about it? Yes, can you help us with what the signs were? Not really. What was the basis for you saying yes? And he said this, I mean, I do remember, for instance, that I went to Animal Liberation Front gathering. There was some suggestion that another unit might have been trying to provide some sort of coverage of my vehicle, which was a van in which I was sleeping in the back of and living in the back of. And I think there was some sort of comment about that's going to be an invasion of privacy. Yes, with the sort of implication that that's not an area they want to be looking too closely at. Was that at a time when you were in a sexual relationship? Yes, although not at that gathering. And so in his evidence, he indicated that there was a situation where deliberately questions were not asked and directly about individuals in photographs because it was obvious that he was in a relationship. But that rings absolutely no bells with you.
It doesn't, sir.
All right.
May I ask, did he in his evidence say, I told him to enter into relationships? Or did he say, I encouraged him, or I gave him sort of the Monty Python nudge, nudge, wink, wink to do it? Did he at any stage say that?
He was asked about another officer, did HN43 speak openly about his sexual activity undercover in front of managers? And Mr. Boyling's reply was, I very much doubt it. I think if it helps you at all, the attitude of the office was largely, I would have described as an understanding that particularly for people in lifestyle fields, there were areas of it that they didn't wish to openly discuss, that officers would be invited to resolve themselves or by speaking to their field member. So maybe, I guess, if I was being cynical, I'd say sort of a don't ask, don't tell policy is probably the best way of presenting it. Is he correct? Don't ask, don't tell.
No, he's not.
This is an officer, HN14 Jim Boyling, who you would see regularly over a period of years.
Yes.
An officer that at the time you respected.
Yes.
You had a good rapport with him.
I thought so.
And he is describing, looking back on his time, his description is that there was a don't ask, don't tell policy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you surprised to hear that? He's
Yes.
saying that. Okay.
Totally wrong.
I'd like to turn now to a different document. Could we please turn up MPS 0748100? So this is your tab B33. So I want to ask you some questions about Rosa. Now, if we turn to page 2 of this document, I wonder if you can sort of expand that. So this is a note that Rosa leaves at a place where Jim Boyling was staying before he withdrew from the field. And you can see that this note says, privacy from upstairs will remember me and the neighbours at number 39. Need to contact his family to know if they've heard anything or if they not what trucking companies he had contact of. Any links to other people he used to work for in Earlsfield, Leighton, or here would be really helpful, as he's godfather, the daughter of one of his old employers. The daughter's 10 or 11 years old, or if you know Privacy, he used to pick up car parts for. So this is a note that Rosa leaves, trying to track down HN14. Is that something you remember?
Not at all, sir.
Do you remember Rosa trying to track down Jim Boyling?
Yes.
Okay. A significant event for you during your time as manager, yes?
Significant, but not unprecedented, not uncommon.
How often did the SDS move offices?
In my time there, twice.
And was one of those occasions because Rosa was trying to track down Jim Boyling?
I don't think specifically, no.
Okay. Could we turn over the page, please? So we can see here, and at the bottom of this document, we see BG, so your initials there. So this is your file note that you've typed, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the 3 paragraphs up from the bottom, before leaving the flat, Rosa wrote out a short note attached, it's the note we've just been looking at, which she asked the decorator to pass on to the landlord. Basically, the note is asking him to contact her with any information he may receive about PD, Psychodream, Jim Boyling in the future. He's not anticipating hearing from her again, but if she does ascertain his phone number, then he will deal with her accordingly. Nothing further has been heard from Rosa since the visit. Psychodream is aware of this development, not unduly concerned. He's confident he has left no trail for her or anyone else to pursue. HN53 will further discuss the matter with Psychodream when they meet on Thursday, the 9th of November. Now, does that jog your memory of this time period here? Does that?
Not really, sir.
It
No.
doesn't, okay.
Clearly shows that I've seen that note 26 years ago, but neither of these are currently in my memory.
I wonder if we could turn forward, please, to page 13. You were Jim Boyling's cover officer, yes?
Yes, sir.
Out of all the officers, you were most directly concerned with his day-to-day welfare, yes?
Yes.
And in particular, a sensitive time is when he's withdrawing from the field, yes? All right. And so we have here a resume of an email from Rosa. Can you see the penultimate sentence? Okay, this is in relation to emails to Jim Boyling. She has started seeing someone, but seems to accept that life moves on.
Yes.
So here, Rosa is contacting Jim Boyling's landlord, trying to get hold of him. And here we have emails being sent from Rosa to Jim Boyling, and then saying that she started seeing someone, but seems to accept that life moves on. Did this give you any cause to think that Rosa had been in a relationship with Jim Boyling?
No.
Could we turn over the page, please? And so this is, again, it's a summary of the emails. And we can see, for example, the second bullet point, many of the emails were confused and erratic, particularly the later ones where she appears uncertain about original thoughts on Jim's identity. Some of the emails are poetry. Rosa talks of finding a new boyfriend and going to live in and its privacy. So again, here you have Rosa sending poetry and emails. There's another reference to the relationship. Rosa talks of finding a new boyfriend. Again, did that cause you to think that Jim Boyling may have had a relationship with Rosa?
Well, it does now, as we all look back on it, knowing that Jim Boyling had a relationship with her. We didn't have that information then. As I said previously, we're looking forward. Rosa's finding a new boyfriend. There's nothing there that says Jim was her old boyfriend. My apologies to Rosa, but that does not tell me that the two of them were in a relationship.
Did you ask? Did you ask Jim Boyling?
No, I doubt very much that I did.
I wonder if we could turn over the page, please. I wonder if we can just expand that. So page 16. So again, just as a generality, you can see long and detailed message to Jim Boyling from Rosa. And again, do you not accept that this is indicative of a relationship?
Have I seen this, sir? Not being funny, have I actually seen this?
Well, have you? These are emails that all of this is from the documentation recovered from the SDS office. And so this is emails that you would have seen at the time. Can we go to... You were Jim Boyling's cover officer.
Yes.
Emails are recovered by the SDS between him and Rosa. Note that Rosa left with the landlord is also on the file in the SDS offices. Would you not have expected to have been shown these documents and asked about them, given that you were his supervisor?
I might well have done, sir, but I have no memory of this whatsoever.
Could we zoom out and just go to page 17, please? Sorry, over the page. We're on page 15. Could we move to page 16? If you can just expand the top bit of that. So again, we can see here in relation to this email, after much persuasion from my sister, I started seeing someone 2 weeks ago. It's early days. I'm heavily scarred, but life moves on. I'm glad life is good with you. I hope it will be for me too. We did have some beautiful times together. Those will stay in a part of my heart. I wish you well. Be gentle to your creativity and be wise out there. Signed off by Rosa. Would you, again, have been expected to have been shown these? If your DCI has obtained emails from Rosa to Jim, instead of keeping them from you, they would have shown you and asked...
I'd have thought they would say, yes.
Because you were a supervisor. But again, does that not... It doesn't ring any bells?
No.
All right. Okay, thanks. If we just turn to page 17, please. So if you can see the number of bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up from the bottom. Can you see it says Rosa talks of finding a new boyfriend and possibly going to live in privacy? Hooray. Again, in terms of this document, you can see the heading there, resume of Jim's withdrawal. Does that not ring any bells at all?
I'm afraid not, sir.
But in terms of the process whereby Rosa is trying to track down Jim Boiling, and as time goes by, you start off with a note, their emails, and it becomes more and more pressure in relation to Jim Boiling being found out. You don't remember that build-up?
No, sorry.
Could we turn to page 19, please? Wonder if we can expand page 19. Rosa contact with the office. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. Tuesday, the 12th of December, 4 calls were received in the office from Rosa. The following is a synopsis of those calls. 11:42 a.m. Duty phone. Rosa asked for Jim. Noel Waugh answered and said he didn't know him. Now, just pausing there, that would have been an extremely significant telephone call, would it not?
Yes.
And you would have discussed that, or did you discuss it with Noel Waugh? Did he?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I think I was there.
Did he describe what the conversation was about? This is just a resume, of a synopsis of those calls. But did he say that Rosa had identified herself as Jim Boyling's girlfriend?
I don't remember that, sir, no.
11:50 a.m. Duty phone. Rosa asked for Matt, a friend of Jim's. Noel Waugh denied all knowledge of Jim. In a distressed state, described Jim as 5'9", and she knew him as Jim Sutton. So again, in terms of that second call, was that something that was discussed with you?
Yes, I'm sure.
11:55 a.m. Office phone. Asked for Jim. BG, so you, answered and denied knowledge of him and said it was a private number and he couldn't help. In relation to your knowledge of Jim Boyling's relationship with Rosa, did this raise your suspicions at all?
It raised my suspicions that Jim's former wearies are trying to find him.
Well, we've gone through the emails and you said you can't recall seeing those emails. But again, in terms of if someone said you're turning a blind eye to this, can you understand why someone might say that you get to the stage where, not out of the blue, but you have a series of emails from Rosa clearly making it abundantly clear that they've been in a relationship and she's trying to find her boyfriend. To say that you weren't really suspicious at this and this was just an activist calling, trying to get in contact with Jim, is that not turning a blind eye to it?
I don't think so, sir, no. As I have said before, looking back historically, yes, it all fits into that pattern now that we know Jim was engaged in sexual relations.
12:25 p.m, duty phone. It's the fourth call of the day. Rosa says, if you see Jim, tell him I'm leaving him. And it's all over. All we have here is the synopsis of those calls.
Yep.
But you would have been discussing nothing but this with Noel Waugh.
I'm sure.
And so, again, where the typed up record is Rosa referring to, if you see Jim, tell him I'm leaving him, is it not obvious that they had been in a relationship?
Looking back, yes.
In his evidence, Jim Boyling said, I phoned HN52, so you, I phoned HN52 when it became obvious to me that I was going to be found by Rosa, and I explained the whole scenario to him. Do you remember Jim Boyling phoning you and explaining the whole scenario to you?
No, I most certainly do not.
He said, I asked for advice. I wasn't sure. The advice might be, we think you should leave the job or whatever. But I really didn't know what to do. And I asked for advice. That was on a weekend, on a Saturday, I think, after I'd been into the internet cafe, and they said, this girl is looking for you all over town. And I had just logged on in my real name, and I could see this was inevitable now. And then this, in his evidence, Jim Boyling said this. He said, OK, we will speak to the management straight away, and we will come and see you 10 o'clock on Monday in the East Squad office, which is where I was working, and we will talk it through with you there. So at 10 o'clock on Monday, nobody turned up and there was no communication at all. Do you remember that? Saying to him that you will speak to management straight away, you will meet him at 10 o'clock on Monday morning in the East Squad office, but instead of meeting up with him, nobody attended.
I don't remember that, no. If I'd had that conversation with him, then yes, I would have passed that on to the management. And yes, meetings would have taken place after the weekend. I have no specific memory of it.
He says either the next day or the day after, I had a message to phone HN53.
Yes.
So I phoned, this is Jim Boyling, saying, I phoned HN53. He said to me, don't call us again. He said, don't call the office, don't call us again. And then he said, I haven't got any time to speak to you. It's not you particularly. We are telling all former officers now not to call us. And in his witness statement, when HN53 said that to him, the way in which Jim Boyling described it in his statements, he was dumbfounded. So he calls you, he explains the scenario to him. There's an agreement to meet up with him, nobody shows up, and then when he contacts the office, HN53 says, I haven't got time to speak to you, don't call the office, and he's dumbfounded.
Can I just check who HN53 is?
Yes, you have the cipher list there. So,
The detective inspector.
Right, thank you, sir. I can't imagine HN53 saying anything like that. He will obviously be able to confirm whether that's true or not, but it seems very unlike him.
Do you remember Jim Boyling phoning you first? So not the office, but phoning you first and essentially asking you for help in explaining the scenario. That call, that doesn't, out of all the calls that he made to you, that must have stood out the most. Here's someone calling you, saying that he's about to be found out by Rosa. He's went to this internet cafe, and the person in the internet cafe said, well, she's looking all over town for you, and he's put in his details. So it's obviously the game is up, and he called you because you're his cover officer, and you don't meet with him. Does that ring any bells?
It doesn't ring any bells, sir. If that conversation took place, and all right, I can't deny that it didn't, I would have done what it suggested. I would have spoken to the senior management, and they got back to Jim, and then it was taken from there. But quite frankly, it's very difficult sat here to go back 25 years and try and remember a sequence of events, a sequence of phone calls. And with respect to Mr. Boyling, all this is coming from what he's saying. And I don't think Mr. Boyling is high on the list of, well...
He's not high on what list?
Clearly, honesty and reliability.
Could we please take this document down and turn up MPS 0722649? Yes, 0722649. Okay, we'll try and find that document. I just want to ask you about something that Jim Boyling has also said, is that in describing the conversation that he had with you on the phone, that his words were, "We both agreed that this was most likely to be my former girlfriend, Rosa." So in terms of describing the situation to you, that he refers to Rosa in those terms as former girlfriend when he's talking to you. Is it possible that he did refer to Rosa as his former girlfriend?
Never referred to anybody as his former girlfriend, or of having a girlfriend, or of having any relations. Never.
In his statement, he also refers to that Rosa identified herself in the calls as his girlfriend. And again, is it possible, given the passage of time, is it possible that she could have identified herself in that way in the calls?
Not to me, not on the one call that I took, no.
Right. Is it fair to say that in relation to Rosa herself, and you're aware now of travelling abroad and all of the effort she made to try and track Jim Boyling down, that there was no thought given to her welfare or her well-being? I'm going to just try one more time with the reference to that. I'm told that that is correct. MPS 0722649. All right. Going to move on to a different officer, HN104 Carlo Soraki. Okay. Now, he was not one of those officers that you were his cover officer. He was someone that was deployed at the same time as you, but you were not directly responsible for him. But do you remember this particular officer?
I do, yes.
Okay. And would you have been, for example, present at those twice weekly meetings? Would he have been in the same room as you?
Yes.
Okay. And again, in terms of relationships, your evidence is you were unaware of any inappropriate relationships as regards that particular officer. Okay. Now, I wonder if we can just go back to your statement, please. And it was one of the paragraphs that you corrected. I just want to ask you about that, please. I wonder if we can go to page 81 in Mr. Greaney's statement. It's paragraph 216. So here you say, I believe I accompanied Carlo on at least one trip to Italy, although in my recollection it was Florence. I acted as cover officer for him and 118 in that time. Now, just pausing there in relation to Florence, and you also mentioned HN118. We know that there was a European Social Forum meeting in Florence in November 2002. Does that sound about right, that it could have been you going out to act as cover officer for Carlo Soraki in relation to that meeting in Florence?
Well, that's the part that we amended at the beginning, that Steve Beals was with me. The two of us went out there.
And you were there, and you ended up having to do all the driving?
Yes.
And that's why that's something that you remember from that. Now, in your statement, you say, we have it here 4 lines down, my recollection is that Carlo did drop out of contact for slightly longer than was normal during this trip, but not for so long that I alerted the office. If I had any idea prior to or during that trip that Carlo was engaging in an intimate relationship in his cover identity, I would have taken these concerns to Mike, reference to Mike Dell, or HN53. Now, in terms of when you're acting as a cover officer, something that you've described that takes place when you're going abroad, UCO is travelling abroad, that you conduct what's called a close pass, is that right?
If it's possible, yes.
And so is the main purpose for your role as cover officer when you're travelling abroad just so that you're someone there, so if something goes wrong, you're already there and it's someone that the officer can contact?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that in terms of the physical contact that you have with the officer is very limited?
Yes.
But what you try to do is a close pass. So, for example, walking past him without acknowledging each other, just so that you can keep an eye on the officer.
Sometimes, yes.
Now, in relation to any trip, would you agree that looking back, it was very easy for, if there is just going to be the odd close pass for an officer, to take an activist girlfriend with him on holiday without being spotted by the management?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we know that Carlo Siraki went on a number of trips abroad, as did other officers with activist girlfriends. And because of the limited contact with the cover officers, this was never spotted. Would you accept that the supervision of officers when they were abroad was another blind patch for the SDS supervisors? That these are officers travelling abroad, but actually what they were doing when they're abroad, it's all on trust.
What they're doing wherever they are, whoever they're with, is always on trust. They could be in the middle of London and we wouldn't have sight of them. The fact that they've gone abroad, same thing, different place.
And as an example of that, I'm not going to take you through the detail of it, but you're aware that in relation to James Thompson's deployment, Operation Lime, a trip to France, he said, to intercept a gun and gunpowder being brought back to this country.
Yes.
That you attended France on that particular trip, yes? But did you see him at all?
No.
And so, again, looking back, for example, to that scenario, you have an officer who can say almost anything, would you accept? And the attitude at the time, well, we trust these officers, we'll take their word for it, we're presuming they're telling the truth, that they have integrity.
Is there any alternative? You set a man up, off you go and infiltrate that group over there. There's 50 of them, get to know them. Go to their parties, go to their homes, do what you like. No, sorry, not do what you like, but behave normally to get into their confidences, to become their friends. You can't sit on their shoulder while they do that. The opportunity to do everything under the sun is there if they choose to do it. I don't see how you stop it.
Do you remember, for example, on this trip, it's going to go to Bordeaux, and then there's going to be a handover of the firearm in Marseille?
Yes.
And then there's a problem contacting you. Can't say where he is exactly, and then the next moment he's already in Marseille, and the handover's taken place.
Yes.
That's a sudden. Do you remember that, the change of plan? He was going to go to Bordeaux first. And
all plans change all the time, sir.
All plans change all the time. but looking back, would you accept that a number of officers, looking back, were pulling the wool over your eyes with some ease, weren't they?
It's not difficult. All they're doing is not telling me. That's not a difficult thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to disprove. There's no deception involved in terms of convincing me that they haven't got a girlfriend or whatever. They just don't mention it.
Mark Jenner was again another officer that you overlapped with, but you weren't his direct supervisor.
Yes.
And again, your evidence is that you had no knowledge of his relationship, the person that we're calling Alison.
No, sir.
In his evidence to the inquiry, Mr. Jenner said his words were in relation to his relationship, that it was a bit of an open secret, is the way he described it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that characterisation, that his relationship with Alison was a bit of an open secret?
No, sir, I wouldn't.
It's a long time ago, but I wonder if you have any recollection of a particular incident. So this is where Mark Jenner, he gave evidence that Noel Waugh had attended a court in Dover, and this was relating to Mr. Jenner's attendance there. And when he returned to the office in front of everyone, he said, "Oh, was that your girlfriend you were with?" So Noel Waugh goes to the magistrate's court, sees Mark Jenner there, and then when everyone's back in the office, making a joke, "Oh, was that your girlfriend that you were with?" Now, Mr. Jenner said, well, actually, Alison wasn't there on that occasion, but he describes the way in which this was sort of casually said in front of everyone, that again, it was an open secret that he was in a relationship. Does that ring any bells or any discussion?
Sir. Could I again ask, has Mr. Jenner or Mr. Scaraci at any stage said they told me that they were having a relationship, or that I encouraged them to do it, or hinted that they should do it? Because the answer to that is no. I had no idea. That may make me look particularly foolish and stupid, but that's the reality of it.
I wonder if we could please turn, so it's at your tab B143, it's MPS 309432, please. Now, in terms of this document, operational legends, I'll just give you a moment to have a look at that. Does that, have you seen that document before? Just to be fair to you, your initials are at the end of it.
Yes.
And so that would suggest that you were on the copy to list, but
You would put everybody's initials on the bottom of it, and they would usually tick it or put their initials there to say that they'd read it. Doesn't ring any bells, sir.
Paragraph 5 of this, so this is Steve Tiddy's note of 10th of October 2000,
Yes.
and again it sort of spills over to the next page. Partnerships in the left-wing field are by and large confined to the parties that they are members of. For example, there are a large number of cohabiting partners relationships within the SWP and Socialist Party, and anyone who enjoys single status over a certain period may invite unwanted suspicion. The most difficult of this type of inquiry is generally instigated from an attached female who may be taking soundings on behalf of one of her friends. The female antennae is a difficult creature to subdue, and whereas as a rule they employ monogamy, they do possess the ability to unearth doubts about perceived relationships. There have been recent operations, Touchy Subject and Psychodream, where due to the lifestyle employed by the operatives, their bona fides were considered unimpeachable. And so in relation to these two touchy subject, HN15 and Psychodream, HN14, he says there have been recent operations where due to the lifestyle employed by the operatives, their bona fides were considered unimpeachable. Now, in relation to his evidence yesterday, when he was asked about this particular document, and it's Steve Tiddy's office note, he was asked whether at the time that he circulated it about the awareness of relationships, and including that of DC Boiling, and he said, would there have been knowledge of the managers? And he said, as a result of this report, I would have said yes. So he accepted that he had knowledge of these two relationships, but he was asked, well, what about the other managers? And the way in which he said it is, as a result of this report, I would have said yes. So he said, well, here's a report referring to the operations of touchy subject Psychodream. Due to the lifestyle employed by the operatives, their bona fides were considered unimpeachable. This is patently not the case in every operation, and consideration should now be given for providing additional operational support to field officers. Do you remember any discussion with Mr. Tiddy about this note or about those two deployments?
No, sir.
How much discussion was there between you and your fellow detective sergeants about each other's officer deployments and issues arising?
Oh, plenty.
Were any of those discussions about sexual relationships with activists?
No.
And again, going back to where we started with the scenarios, well, these are questions you're going to be asked about things that could and probably will arise during a deployment. So why was it asked of undercover officers or candidate officers as a specific scenario, but then during the whole of the deployments, out of all the years that you were a sergeant, that it never came up in conversation at all?
I can't answer that, sir.
Is the answer to that it wasn't in your mind and the minds of your fellow managers, that it wasn't a big deal, that if officers have relationships with activists and their cover identity, it wasn't something that registered at the time as being anything wrong? If anything, it was something maybe described as something amusing?
No, certainly not. It's, as I said earlier on, it's a deal breaker. If it comes to light, as far as I'm concerned, they're off the squad and the matter goes forward for disciplinary consideration. That's why nobody tells you that they're doing it, because they know that's the end of their operation and they're facing trouble.
In his evidence, Carlo Siraki referred to a time where he's describing to his managers that one of the activists, we're calling Alfred, and he says, well, Alfred and his partner tried to pair me off with female activists on several occasions. And his description, Carlo Siraki's description, was this: the initial response from SDS management was merriment, and the response was that I should use my guile and common sense to deal with this. So again, does that not reflect the attitude in the SDS office, so that it's as Jim Boyling said, don't ask, don't tell, that this was going on. It wasn't considered an issue, and when it is arisen, it's almost treated as a little bit of a joke.
No, that reflects exactly what it should be, that you use your guile and your common sense and whatever to get out of that situation. It's not that difficult, to be honest.
So I wonder if this is a convenient moment to break, because I'm coming to the end of questions about relationships, and before moving to another topic, but also an opportunity, given the time, for any additional Rule 10s that need to be put.
If you think that's sensible, then I agree. How long do you need?
May I have 10 minutes,
10 minutes.
with a view to, after we resume, continuing up until 1 o'clock?
Certainly.
Mr. Greaney, I want to ask you about the topic of race and racism. One of the points that you make in your statement is that you attended the one-day racial incident awareness training, which I think was known as RIAT, or the RIAT. Is this, again, I'm asking you something that happened a long time ago, but you describe that as a worthwhile course. Is there anything that you could just help us with from this distance of time of what was covered in the racial incident awareness training and the focus on that?
I have to be honest, sir, I can't remember it after all this time.
And your understanding was this, as you understood it, likely that SDS office staff would also have participated in?
Yeah.
In relation to training about issues of race, to what extent, over and above, for example, one-day courses such as this, did it feature at all in the training of you and your fellow managers, but also the UCOs that you were supervising?
I'm not sure I'm with you, sir.
So in terms of race as an issue, yes, and being sensitive to issues relating to race and discrimination, was there any, above the RIAT, was there any training or any discussion about race at all?
No, sir.
So of course your time as manager began in 1997, and so a couple of years into that there was the Macpherson report, the finding of institutional racism. In terms of that must have been a talking point. 1999. In 1999.
Sorry, I misheard. Yeah.
So in 1999, Macpherson report, institutional racism clearly would have been a topic discussed in the Metropolitan Police, and at the time you were 2 years into being a manager.
Yeah.
What do you recall about the discussions that you had in the SDS office? So this is, what was the reaction? A hostile reaction? I can't believe that this has been a finding, this is unwarranted, or, well, we need to change practices. Just help us with, again, going back to 1999, you've got that finding. What's the response, the discussions in the SDS office at that time, or the nature of, the tone of those discussions?
I don't wish to be unhelpful, sir, but I can't remember what discussions we had about that 25 years ago. I know I'm starting to sound like a parrot, but it doesn't stick in the mind all these years later.
In terms of the officers that you were directly supervising, so they did not include UCOs such as HN81, who infiltrated groups such as Movement for Justice. But were you not aware that groups such as Movement for Justice were being spied on by SDS UCOs, that there were reports referring to Stephen Lawrence family campaign? What was your awareness of that, please?
I knew that there was an officer within those groups, not the Lawrence family group, and I don't think he was directed there. I think it kind of fell into his lap because that's the way his group moved, and he went with it.
I'm going to ask you about the way in which you describe this topic in your statement. I wonder if we could please have Mr. Greaney's statement back, please. Looking in particular at page 67, please. So paragraph 1, so this is, we can see in the middle there's the heading Reporting Justice Campaign, so just to orientate yourself with where we are in your statement. And then paragraph 175, as I have explained above, the SDS was not specifically seeking intelligence relating to the aims or impact of any justice campaigns, whether they were the subject of direct or collateral reporting. The focus was on public order, particularly where other groups sought to hijack legitimate protests for their own ends and criminality. I was not routinely involved in processing such reporting, except when the relevant cover officer was absent. I'm unable to comment on the effect SDS operations had on such campaigns. insofar as there was any, because I was not sufficiently focused on them at the time. So you set out clearly there your limited involvement directly with those reports. Yeah. But in terms of your reference to the reporting being direct, I wonder if we can, in terms of that description, so where you say that, as I've explained above, the SDF was not specifically seeking intelligence relating to the aims or impact of any justice campaigns, whether they were subject of direct or collateral reporting. Now, just as a broad principle, do you accept that in addition to what you've described as collateral reporting, there was direct reporting on various justice groups?
I'm sure there was, yes. And
would you agree that, in particular, the Stephen Lawrence campaign, a lot of these justice groups were often black justice groups?
Yeah.
And in terms of the way in which the justification has been put forward, we've heard evidence from UCOs and other managers that broadly says, well, these groups were looked at because there was a concern, these justice groups were looked at because there was a concern that they were being hijacked by other groups. And I want to ask what your view at the time was that the SDS was focusing on black justice groups at this time, and whether that was appropriate.
The SDS was focusing on public order incidents, and the officer that was within whichever one of those groups it was, I can't say, was keeping everybody up to date on what the potential public disorder could be.
And for example, in terms of Dwayne Brooks, a number of reports on Dwayne Brooks in the context of the Lawrence family, were you aware of those reports? So reports of Dwayne Brooks, including amounts of settlement offers with the MPS.
Certainly the name Dwayne Brooks rings a bell, yes. And
so when you say it rings a bell as something that was reported on, that references to Dwayne Brooks, that he appeared in the SDS reporting?
Yes.
And again, looking back on it from today, do you consider that there was an overemphasis by the SDS on black groups, black justice groups?
No.
I'm going to ask you, please, about, if we can turn to page 68, paragraph 178 in your statement, please. And it's one of those paragraphs that spills over to the next page. I wonder if we can have both of them. So I just want to ask you about this in particular. So, as to the propriety of acting D.I. Walton meeting HN81, I do not remember taking a view on the matter then. My view now is that it was problematic at best, but if HN81 was told to attend by Bob Lambert, he had to turn up. I would not have discussed this outside the SDS, and I do not remember there being any discussion in the office. I do not know what, if any, consideration was given to informing the Macpherson inquiry of SDS activities in relation to the Stephen Lawrence campaign. Now, again, your description as problematic at best, can you explain why you've set that out in those terms, please?
Well, I don't think that this is a meeting that would have been instigated by the SDS. I believe this would have come from the other direction. And it's as simple as that.
Would you agree with this, that this meeting between HN81 and D.I. Walton is a long way from what the SDS was set up for in 1968?
Well, I think, as I've just said to you, I don't think it was the SDS inputting this. I think it was the other side saying, at whatever level, we need to, or we would like to speak to the guy that knows what's going on here.
And the McPherson inquiry looking into issues of racism within the MPS and a meeting taking place between D.I. Walton and HN81. Would you accept that it is understandable that people would say, well, that there is an element of racism here because the focus is on criticism of the Metropolitan Police by those representing black justice groups?
No, to be honest, I don't think the SDS were particularly worried about criticism from outside. And I really don't know. Sorry, I've lost my own train of thought here. It's very difficult to work this out on a couple of paragraphs. There's very, very little context around this for me to frame my answer.
I want to turn to a number of other topics. So I want to get as many points covered with you in the next 25 minutes that we have. And so in relation to some of these, not going to be able to go into as much detail as you would like, but I wonder if you can help us with a number of these. First, I want to ask you about HN15's then wife, who we're calling S, has described Christmas parties and attending Christmas parties. And I just want to ask you, because this was an opportunity for managers to meet the spouses, what's your recollection of that as an event, the SDS Christmas parties where the UCO's partners attend? Is that something that you can remember?
Yes, that was an event that took place annually when I went there in 97. I think the last one was 1998. There was only two that I could remember. And then I think it was a tradition, and the tradition fell away. It wasn't done again. But the whole point of it was just a Christmas party, like every other office in the country, and an opportunity to meet everybody.
Do you remember in particular Mark Jenner's then wife attending any of the parties? Please don't say her name, we're referring to her as S, but do you have any particular recollection of her at any number of these Christmas parties at all?
No.
What was from your perspective, what was the function of these Christmas parties in the sense of inviting the partners along? What was the purpose of that?
It's a Christmas party. We used to go somewhere away from London. Wives and partners came along and everybody met each other and interacted. As I say, office parties all over the country. There was no underlying reason behind it other than it's Christmas, let's have a Christmas lunch somewhere.
In terms of this perspective, that Mark Jenner, during his deployment, having a relationship with activists and as a result of that also deceiving his then wife, S, and from S's perspective, attending these Christmas parties, circulating with the UCOs and the managers, and the thought that this was all known, that all of these officers having these various relationships, and looking back on those Christmas parties, that it was a betrayal of the wives and partners who attended.
It's never. No, sir. Never intended as such.
Do you understand that perspective?
From the lady's point of view, yes, I can. I'm sorry that it came to that. It's one thing that does bug me more than most things in this inquiry, is that there are a number of wives there who I made a conscious effort to keep in touch with when their guys or lady were out in the field, whether for long periods of time or at potentially difficult demonstrations, I always like to keep them informed when it had finished, when their partner was safe and sound and there weren't any more problems. And I got to know 2 or 3 of them quite well. I would hate to think that any of them think that I was doing that to their face, knowing that their husband was having an affair with a weary.
Did that contact with the spouses, the partners, include HN26's husband?
Not so much. I remember the gentleman, and yes, if there'd been a particular activity and it was over and she was fine, I'm sure I phoned him and said, it's okay. That was a very important part of it. You don't want partners, especially wives, sitting at home, perhaps seeing things on the telly, worrying that their other half is in danger.
In terms of HN26's husband, he was aware that HN26 was having a sexual relationship with Thomas Frampton. And you've said you did have some interaction with him, but your indication is that this wasn't raised as a topic at all. This was never. There was no hint.
You said he knew.
Yes.
He didn't tell me. Unless he said different, he didn't tell me.
I wonder if we could just turn up tab B225. It's MPS 0728243. So this is a Hearn document. I wonder if we could just turn to... So you can see it says brief summary of MG11 by ex-husband of HN26.
Yes, sir.
So this, in his MG11, which is a statement, the ex-husband of HN26 explains the employment of 26 on the SDS and his understanding of it. I recognised and understood that due to this role, she would have to develop and maintain relationships with members of her target group and that she would be away from home for periods of time. He explained that they both had demanding roles and HN26 appeared to handle the pressure well. He stated that after 2.5 years, HN26 changed. She became completely absorbed by her role. Very little separation from pretend and reality. The two seemed to swap place. She wasn't really HN26 anymore, spent longer and longer away from home. When she did come home, she was exhausted. He explained how their relationship became non-existent. 6 months before she came out of the field, 6 months before, she told him that she was in a relationship with someone called Joe and that he was a member of her target group. I asked her whether Joe knew that she was a police officer working undercover, and she told me that she had told him what she did. To date, HN26's ex-husband is aware that she is still with Joe. So here's HN26 husband describing the change that takes place with HN26. He asks her, she admits to the relationship. And given what you have just said about your some interaction with the husband, there was no hint of any of this at all with your discussions with him.
I think he says further on in another document that he didn't tell us.
But again, is this not another example of this is going on under your watch as a supervisor?
It's all going on under my watch, so yes.
I was asking you earlier about HN16 in the context of your knowledge of his relationships whilst he was deployed. And I also asked you some questions about Operation Lime. Can I just ask you just some further questions about that particular operation? Do you remember being involved with a dry run in the November before the actual trip? Does that...
Yes.
And do you remember having a meeting at HN16's house in relation to that dry run? Does that ring any bells?
Doesn't bring anything to mind, but I'm sure that would have happened. Yes.
Did you actually attend? Did you go with him on the dry run in your role as a supervisor?
Yes.
Okay. On that trip, you said that for the main trip you didn't see him. Did you see him on this previous trip?
Yes, I think so.
There's reference in relation to that dry run that they were stopped coming back, and there was a stop, they were stopped, which his evidence was that others were spooked by this, but that he pointed out the random nature of what happened and that he was reassuring the group that it would all be all right. Did you have any concern that a very serious offence, as far as you understood it at the time, was about to take place? This was the dry run for it. Were you not concerned that your undercover officer was reassuring others in the group not to be rattled and reassuring them? Did that provide any sort of concerns to you?
No.
No. You were not directly involved in the investigation of HN16 because that was conducted by HN53. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
But you were fully aware, were you not, of the various findings that HN53 made? Is that correct?
I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Well, I'm just going to... Were you at least fully aware that as far as HN53 was concerned, that HN53 thought that HN16 should be referred to the Directorate for Professional Standards, that this is that potentially criminal offences had taken place and that he needed to be seriously disciplined?
I know they were going in that direction, so yes.
Were you aware that HN53's view of Operation Lime was that it was false, that this is something that James Thompson had invented to improve his chances of staying on as an SDS officer, that it was a complete fiction?
The first time that it was revealed to me as a complete fiction was when Operation Hearn came round to see me, whenever that was, 2014. I hadn't been told I'd gone by then, but I hadn't been told by the existing SDS staff.
And what was your reaction then to learning of that by Operation Hearn? What was your reaction?
Disbelief, sir, with a bit of depression thrown in, and dismay.
Again, you were supervising James Thompson for a number of years. You saw him regularly. How do you account for him acting in that particular way under your supervision?
I'm not qualified to make an assessment of his behaviour, sir. Unbelievable would be the first word that comes to mind.
One of the most serious, if not the most serious aspect of HN16's deployment was using a deceased child's identity, Kevin Crossland.
Yes.
Now, by this stage, the use of deceased children's identities was no longer a feature of legend building. And again, in terms of his application for documentation, mobile phones registered in that name, the name being put on voters' register, passport in that name. And again, in terms of all of those things, if someone were to say, well, how could he have done all of that without anyone in the SDS knowing about it at the time? What would your response be? Here is an undercover officer who, amongst other things, has produced a false identity in this way without anyone in the office knowing. How do you account for that?
Because he didn't tell anyone he was doing it, sir. I'm sorry, but like any activity of that kind, you do it privately, discreetly, and you don't tell anybody about it. It's not something that you're going to stumble across from the other way. And it's not a question that you would imagine yourself asking your officers routinely, you know, are you obtaining false documentation? Have you set up a false alias? Have you made up a completely spurious gun running incident? That doesn't come on the radar.
Can I ask you about Helen Steele? What was your first recollection of realising that Helen Steele was trying to find out who HN5 John Dines was?
I don't have any recollection. I know it happened. I know that was going on.
When did you find out about the relationship between John Dines and Helen Steele?
I found out, I knew that she was pursuing John Dines, but that was years after the event. John Dines was long gone before I got to the SDS.
What knowledge did you have as to what the SDS and the police did to assist John Dines when Helen Steele was looking for him? Are you aware of any of that? It's referred to as Operation Muscat.
No, sir.
Do you recall any discussion in the office about this?
I'm sure there was, but again, I apologise, but after 25 years I can't summon up discussions that were had that long ago on many subjects.
And again, would you agree that it's not unlike the situation with Rosa, that an undercover officer engages in a relationship with an activist and then disappears, and then understandably they try to find him?
They do.
And would you agree, again, with no thought given to the welfare of the women that were deceived, or the focus on the undercover officer?
Yep.
Can I please ask you about a specific document? I wonder if we can put up on screen MPS 0245149. Now, you will see first, of course, this is before your time as a manager. It's 1995, so it's DCI Keith Edmondson's note. I just want to ask you about this. So this is a special branch report concerning the arrest of Jeff Shepherd on the 26th of May 1995 in connection with animal rights extremist offences. It will be immediately apparent that this intelligence must be protected. However, it is provided with the express intention of assisting senior officers understand the extent of Shepherd's activity and intention and provide a possible line of inquiry should the circumstances present themselves. It must be emphasised that while the source is still in place and for the moment secure, his continued security is dependent upon the way in which he conducts himself and the way in which the police activity, both past and future, indicates lines of inquiry and the perceived strategy behind those inquiries. And then we can see this minute sheet and report must be passed by hand at all stages. We can see the various officers that it's passed to, and that number 7, this is passed to you. Is this an example of SDS intelligence that you received when you were in your Arnie role?
Not a classic example, no.
Can you remember why this was you were one of those recipients, that it must be passed by hand to? Are you able to shed any light of that?
Well, because I was in Arnie, sir. It's obviously gone to Mr. Leeming and another officer there. I was part of the Arnie office.
Do you have any...
This is 1995.
It's 1995. Do you have any recollection about police knowledge about a firearm at any stage in this distance in time?
No, sir.
All right. When you started as a manager in the SDS, you indicated that you didn't have any handover at all. Is that right?
Yes.
The manager that took over from you is Ron Gilbertson.
Yes.
To what extent did you provide him with a handover? In other words, to bring him up to speed with what the job entailed, the pitfalls, the problems, anything like that could help him in his role as manager in the SDS, i.e. taking over from you?
I can't remember that, but I would like to think that I did give Ron a good introduction. I would like to think that I told him about each officer and as much as I knew about it. Perhaps I didn't, but I'm hopeful that I did.
At any time in your discussion, did you mention any concerns about misconduct by any officers in any way?
No.
And
well, I mean, I don't know if the James, I probably would have gone on about Operation Lime and that sort of thing. I don't know.
But at that time, is your evidence that you, as far as Operation Lime are concerned, you believed James Thompson had told the truth about it?
Yes.
In relation to True Spies, the 3-part episode that was aired by BBC Two in 2002, so this is about a year before your time as manager concluded. Could you just help us with the discussion in the office that took place between UCOs and managers when these episodes were aired on television? What was the talk about True Spies? Was there a sense of betrayal?
Absolutely, yes. Anger. The fact that it had placed them all in very difficult positions, either in reality or within their mental capacity, to think that this was now being discussed and shown on the television, and that their predecessors, some of them, had contributed to it.
In your mind, who was to blame for this being aired?
Oh, I have no idea, sir.
Were you aware of Roger Pierce's involvement in any of the liaisons with this programme?
I don't know.
Were you part of the steps that were taken to reassure past and present UCOs?
I would have been, yes.
And so that was in the context of you being concerned about their welfare?
Of course.
Would it be too high to say that there was anger in the SDS office after that programme was shown?
Certainly.
Elected politicians, were you ever given any specific instructions that you should treat elected politicians any differently when the officers were producing their intelligence reports?
No.
In relation to James Thompson and the campaign against capitalism demonstration on the 18th of June 1999, also known as J18, he has indicated that you were aware of what he was proposing to do in advance of that day. Do you have any recollection of discussing what he was going to do in advance of J18 that day, specifically in relation to his plan to purchase 4 cars and then crash them or park them on the entrance to the area to the city to block the police, and then to abandon those vehicles. Do you remember any discussion with him in advance of that?
No, not with him. I can remember that the demonstrators had planned to set up false accidents at traffic lights somewhere. I can't remember where.
So Jim Boyling said it was his idea. He bought the cars and he planned the whole thing. What's your reaction to that?
I don't know, sir.
In relation to the NPOIU, what was your knowledge of the NPOIU whilst you were a manager in the SDS?
Well, I think the MPIOU was a development from Arnie, and we were told at some stage that they were going to be putting police officers undercover in the field in the manner of the SDS.
To any extent, was there any competition with the NPOIU in the sense that the SDS felt competitive or felt superior to the NPOIU? Was there any tension or any sort of interaction on that level?
There was no tension. It was, as far as I was concerned, well, you go away and do what you're doing, and never let's try not to tread on each other's toes.
So the undercover officers and the NPOIU had to conduct the NUTAC course. Were you aware of that particular course?
No.
Were you ever asked by a UCO in the office whether they could attend or should attend that course?
No.
May I ask about DCS Colin Black? You've said in your statement that you would come to the SDS office premises reasonably frequently and that there was nothing remarkable about these visits. Could you just help us with your recollection of DCS Black attending the offices, what he would attend for, and the nature of the communication? So what I'm asking about is what's the degree of interaction between what's happening in the SDS office and DCS Black with his, as you described it, reasonably frequent visits to the office there. What do you recall?
Well, that interaction would have been between the Detective Chief Inspector and Mr. Black. And it's basically what Mr. Black would have done to any of the units under his supervision. But to do so at the yard, he's just got to walk down the corridor and do the bits and pieces. With us, we're away from there. So he would just phone up and make an appointment periodically to come and see the office.
We have heard recent evidence from Helen Steele that one of the other UCOs that you supervised, HN60, had a relationship in his cover identity with a woman he met on a horticultural course. Were you aware of that relationship?
I was told of a relationship 7 days ago by my barrister. Prior to that, I had absolutely no knowledge of it whatsoever.
Finally, can we just end by, I wonder if we can just put up on screen page 16, paragraph 48 of your statement. So you say here, if I had my time again, I would have no hesitation in being a cover officer. Overall, the role was an important one, even though I placed it second to the work I did on B Squad in terms of my personal career highlights. I can understand why former UCOs might feel that their roles are now tainted due to the actions of a number of their former colleagues. In my view, the actions of a few completely undermine the valuable work done by the majority, both in my time and throughout the history of the SDS. Can I just challenge your reference to the actions of a few? Because would you accept, at least from everything that you have been told, at least today, that the majority of the officers that you were supervising, HN26 with Thomas Frampton, HN14 with Monica, Ruth and Rosa, HN16 with Sarah and Ellie, and HN60 with the woman that we were just describing, that it is not a few officers, but this was endemic in the SDS at the time. It's not one or two bad apples.
It's certainly a lot more than I ever thought, so yes.
Your words, if I had my time again, I would have no hesitation in being a cover officer. But if you had your time again, what would you have done differently, given everything that you're aware of now?
You would have to have regular meetings with the officers and go through exactly what they're doing. You've got to be tighter on them. I don't know how you're going to do it.
So those are my questions. I don't know whether there is any re-examination, though.
Yes, please, just one small matter. It won't take long. Could we have on screen, please, Mr. Greaney's witness statement, which is, I hope, MPS 0749, there you go, 291, and at page 43, the topic's the Tradecraft Manual. Mr. Greaney, you say at paragraph 109 there, just have that enlarged. While I remember that there was a Tradecraft Manual, I do not recall that it was in the form that the inquiry has received it. It was a collection of anecdotes from individual officers similar to appendices B and C, and it had no particular status within the SDS. It certainly was not deemed authoritative on any point of tradecraft. Prospective UCOs were encouraged to discuss their preparation with the deployed UCOs in preference to reading documents. The Tradecraft Manual, quote-unquotes, that you were taken to earlier,
Yes, sir.
was, according to the evidence we've heard, quite a lengthy document. In fact, not complete. It has gaps in it, and it was produced by HN2 Andy Coles after his deployment in a back office period of time. Do we take it from paragraph 109 that you think you ever saw that document or were aware of it?
Yes, sir, I was aware of it.
The Andy Coles document?
Oh, the Andy Coles one? No, it doesn't ring any bells, sir.
Do you recall it being given to or shown to undercover officers before they went into the field?
I can't remember that, no.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Forgive me if I've oversimplified your evidence, but the impression that I've got is that a great deal went on in and outside the SDS office of which you were unaware.
Yes, sir.
There we are. Thank you for attending to give evidence. I think that will be the conclusion of it. I can't rule out that you may be asked to come back, but I think it's most unlikely.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you. We'll resume at 2:05.